Before I call the member for Bennelong, I remind the House that this is the honourable member's first speech, and I ask the House to extend to him the usual courtesies. The member for Bennelong.
Mr Speaker, I rise to speak to this chamber for the first time as the member for Bennelong. I congratulate my new colleagues from both sides of the House on the quality and substance of your maiden speeches. Your stories have been diverse, compelling and educational. Your stories have been moving, motivating, and yours, Ken, inspiring. It's an honour to be in this position, and I am truly grateful to the people of Bennelong for the trust and faith that they have placed in me. However, that honour is immediately replaced with a deep sense of responsibility to do my best with integrity, honesty and fairness. I acknowledge my predecessors in Bennelong, Sir John Cramer, our former Prime Minister John Howard and Maxine McHugh. The electorate of Bennelong is located in the north-western suburbs of metropolitan Sydney and was named after a senior man of the Eora people, one of the first Indigenous Australians to effect influence and understanding with the English settlers. Befriending Governor Phillip, they travelled to England together in 1792 on what would now be called a cultural exchange. Bennelong died in 1813 at Kissing Point in modern-day Putney, and a landmark remains there to this day on the spot where he is buried. A rowing race and our first brewery were also established on the site at around this time. In 1868, a local grandmother by the name of Maria Ann Smith, also known as Granny Smith, grew her first batch of green apples that bear her name and are now grown the world over. 2 weeks ago, an estimated 85,000 people were attracted to the 25th anniversary of the Granny Smith Festival in Eastwood to celebrate the history and culture of our Bennelong community. Bennelong has transformed from market gardens to billion-dollar shopping malls like Top Ryde City and the third largest business district in the region, Macquarie Park. It was also the birthplace of Betty Cuthbert, one of our greatest ever Olympians. Sport has had a significant role in our country's history, in defining our character and in my own personal development. I'm honoured by Ken Rosewall's presence here today. Ken is the most enduring champion tennis has seen. Ken played in his first Wimbledon final in 1954, and I can see he's embarrassed already, and his last 20 years later. I won't say what the result was. When you enter the centre court at Wimbledon, there is a quote from Rudyard Kipling's poem If. It reads, "If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same." This is the hallmark of champion people. Ken Rosewall and John Howard grew up in close proximity and are of a similar vintage. John Howard demonstrated every characteristic of a champion, and he was both modest in victory and gracious in defeat. John and Ken treated both those two impostors just the same. My motivation to enter politics was largely inspired by a meeting with John Howard and Brendan Nelson. Both expressed the view that our party would benefit greatly by attracting people with real-life experience who could contribute to the development of policy. John made the point that the only way a party should seek government was through the strength of their policies, and that the only legitimate way a government should hold office was to implement those policies. Mr Speaker, I grew up as the youngest member of a great family, filled with love, laughter, support and encouragement, whatever the latest endeavour. Not long ago, my mother quizzed me on hearing a report that I was entering politics. She was incredulous, but quickly repaired to assure me that she thought that I would make an excellent Prime Minister. And And you think she was optimistic. My dad went bush before finishing school. Mum had been a school teacher. Dad was passionate, the dreamer, the joke teller, the man with a raucous laugh and a very naughty sense of humour. Mum, proper, restrained, reasoned, practical, moderation her motto. They were a great team. We were a classic Menzies-era family. Dad, a small businessman, our ultimate prize to own our family home. I have 3 sisters, Pam, Annette and Sue. Annette and Sue are here. 3 great brother-in-laws, Locke, Alan and Marcus. And 3 wonderful children, Emily, Georgia and Charlie. Annette threw me my first tennis balls to hit. I was using Pam's racket. I swung and missed time and again. Annette was patient. The racket was abused. I'm sorry, Pam. I became angry and angry at my inability to make contact with the ball despite my enormous confidence. I persisted, and this led to a series of death matches with my sister Sue. Losing to her was worse than death. It was very hard to be a good sport. Sue went to boarding school, and against my next opponent, Huey from across the road, the death matches continue. It was years before I won a set. When I finally did, I ran around the court, cheering and screaming with delight, punching the air. I was not modest in victory. At my first major event, I met a girl called Yvonne Goolagong. We were both 10. Sitting next to her was comforting, as we seemed to share an equal amount of apprehension and pre-match nerves. My first coach, Sid Drake, had a saying that you don't learn much when you win, but you should learn when you lose. Many losses followed. I learned to try hard. I learned to keep trying regardless of the score. I learned to observe and analyse, to stay calm in a crisis and to control my temper. Sometimes the pursuit of my tennis dreams meant that I had to miss school. I love tennis. Mr. Speaker, my education was very different to many of my colleagues. Year 11 was replaced with the world as my classroom and Harry Hopman, the legendary Davis Cup captain, my teacher. Harry was more mentor than coach. He often talked of his friendship with our party's founder, Sir Robert Menzies, whose daughter Heather is here today. We travelled to Europe in 1968, which was plagued with industrial unrest. The Italians had elevated strike action to an art form which provided them more time to be Italian, and they did it with such style. That was for Connie. The French Open was nearly cancelled because of strikes. The event proceeded with the added benefit, as no one was working, the crowds were great. So was the tennis. And Rosewell beat Laver in the final. Later that year, we were due to play in Czechoslovakia. That event was cancelled. Russia had invaded. We then went to Russia. Our guide kept the Communist Party line for much of the time, but by the end of our time there, her private thoughts were being confided. We played in Poland. We were taken to Auschwitz by Harry's friend from before the war. He cried and we cried. These were not the experiences enjoyed by a regular 16-year-old boy from Sydney's northern beaches. I learnt of discrimination travelling to South Africa with Arthur Ashe. He had been granted a visa declaring him an honorary white. In Arthur's hometown, I practised on the adjoining court one morning at the Richmond Country Club. He was the first African-American allowed to play there. In one of life's great ironies, Arthur's father had worked as a janitor at that same club. I played the first professional tennis match in China. I played in Iran when the Shah was the ruler, and I toured India on many occasions. It's these experiences that have provided me with the opportunity of a real-life education and has served as preparation for my role as representative of one of Australia's most diverse and multicultural electorates. Bennelong boasts nearly every language and culture attained through a strong history of migration dating back to the English settlers. People have come from every part of the world to make Australia their home. Mr. Speaker, in many ways, Bennelong is modern Australia. Bennelong perfectly reflects the diversity and harmony we are so proud of in this country. Why do people leave all that is familiar to go halfway around the world to start over again? They bring their dreams for a better life for themselves and their families. They bring their courage to have a go, with the odds stacked against them playing so far from home. Our new Australians bring energy, effort, innovation, and most of all, they bring their hopes. Every soul who comes to our country enriches us and continues the constant redefining of what it is to be Australian. In the case of Bennelong, with vibrant Chinese, Indian and Korean communities, all they want is opportunity, the opportunity to have a fair go. Our country was founded on those who came here seeking opportunities. Opportunity is the first essential ingredient to achieve success. Through tennis, I was fortunate to have the opportunity to be coached, mentored, and most of all, subjected to the scrutiny of competition. The system was clear and encouraged competitive performance, and the scoring system gave no advantage to reputation. It was a performance-oriented occupation. Harry Hopman's core philosophy was to relieve his players of any expectation of winning, leaving them free to go for their shots, expand their envelope, to do their best, to fulfil their potential. Playing safe may achieve a short-term goal against inferior opposition, but the ultimate goal would be lost. As Alan Jones says, to win without risk is victory without glory. To realise our country's full potential, every Australian must have the opportunity to compete and earn just reward for their effort and success. For the past 15 years, I've been involved with the development of multi-activity sports centres. The formula is the sporting equivalent of the modern shopping mall. These facilities have been successful throughout Europe and North America and provide communities with the opportunity to exercise and participate in sports and socialise. This is the best medicine for physical and mental health. These centres are in reality preventative medicine health clinics, but more fun. In Australia, we have gone from the highest levels of participation in active sports to now being amongst the most obese and unhealthy, with increasing health costs spent on illness resulting from poor lifestyle choices. In Britain, land zoned for sport and recreational development may be leased from 99 to 125 years. In contrast, I needed an Act of Parliament in South Australia to scrounge a 50-year lease to redevelop the historic Memorial Drive Club. The entire process took 7 years. The Ryde Aquatic Centre and Next Generation Club in my electorate of Bennelong only exists because of the once-in-a-lifetime event of the Olympic Games coming to Sydney. A decade later, that centre attracts over 1 million visitors a year. In the time it took to develop 3 clubs in Australia, our founding company in Britain went from having 20 clubs to over 90 clubs, employing thousands of staff and having over 500,000 members. This business sold for over £900 million. Mr. Speaker, if our laws mirrored those in Britain, it would have given us the opportunity for this kind of investment in our nation's economic and physical health. During 6 months of campaigning, including door-knocking over 9,000 homes, one of the most common complaints was that neither the state or federal governments showed any clear vision for the future. No business operates without serious consideration for its plans for the future. What is our master plan? Where will we be in 50 years? One of the big issues confronting my electorate is population density. Community organisations like RAID, Mars and Capo have sprouted up from the grassroots to challenge the overcrowding and overdevelopment with little consideration to infrastructure planning. In their maiden speeches, so many of my colleagues have talked about these coinciding dynamics on a collision course in their own electorates. There has been talk in the past of decentralisation and a conversion from the lucky country to the clever country, but little has been achieved. It is now time for us to make our own luck and not squander our inheritance. We must look beyond 3-year cycles and embrace long-term vision. The growth of our 2 largest cities has been disproportionate to the rest of the country, and infrastructure development has not kept pace. It is outrageous when you consider that the air corridor between Sydney and Melbourne is the 4th busiest in the world, and yet the highway linking these 2 cities is still not 4 lanes all the way, and the railway line reduces to a single one-way track for parts of this journey. Mr Speaker, I witnessed similar growth pressures whilst based in Atlanta, Georgia in the 70s. During this time, the great northern cities of the United States were encountering problems of overdevelopment, and the infrastructure was not keeping up. The cost of living was skyrocketing, the cost of doing business was rising in line. The deterioration of the quality of life in overcrowded and underserviced cities brought with it the prevalence of crime. Does this sound familiar? Atlanta seized on this opportunity of selling the competitive advantage of relocating companies south, where housing prices and business costs were a fraction of those in the north. Infrastructure was vital. Highways and railroads were built to anticipate demand. Hartsfield-Jackson Airport was upgraded to the point that it is now the busiest airport in the world. There is a saying in Atlanta, if you die in the south, you've got to go through Hartsfield to get to heaven. And that is true. This phenomenal growth in Atlanta triggered the boom in the Sun Belt from Florida to California. Where is our Atlanta to trigger a broader, more sustainable, efficient and competitive plan of growth for Australia? The current path of relentless expansion of 2 or 3 cities and a little more than welfare mentality of handouts to regional areas is simply not sustainable. By partnering with business, planning long-term infrastructure programs, government can help develop a far better outcome for our citizens. Through this comes sustainable economic development for those regions, allowing them to lift themselves up and stand on their own strong, proud feet. Sydney and Melbourne will remain our 2 greatest cities. This greatness should not be judged by population and size, but by livability and efficiency. If we continue to focus our growth largely on these 2 cities, we are limited by how much we as a nation can grow. If through infrastructure we can encourage the development of tens of cities, our potential of growth is enhanced commensurately. Strategic long-term planning is essential for optimal growth. With less than a week to go in the recent federal elections, the biggest single election pledge, $2.1 billion, made by this government to build a railway line from Epping to Parramatta, a piece of infrastructure that would greatly help an overcrowded and underserviced part of my electorate. This pledge was given despite the New South Wales state government spending millions of dollars on analysis of transport and infrastructure needs and not even listing this railway build in their 10-year plan. Such rash planning decisions made in the heat of a campaign should never corrupt our nation's long-term infrastructure development. We have become victims of a need to play infrastructure catch-up. We must follow the lead of visionary Australians like John Bradfield to build beyond our present needs and effectively plan for our future. Can we capture, harness, use or modify what we have seen in the phenomenal growth of the Sun Belt corridor of the United States? Progress on these issues will help ease pressure on the limited amenities, roads and classrooms in Bennelong and around the country. This is a national issue that impacts on each one of us. Let us debate in this chamber a contest of ideas, a contest of visions. As with any endeavour in life, true and honest competition, unfettered by political bias, will produce, in this case, the best plan the best result for our nation's future. We need the courage to attack this challenge. It has been ignored for too long. To shirk this responsibility, to say it's too tough, would be an affront to those who have fought to make Australia what it is today. Our forefathers who had a plan, an optimistic vision, and who made the most of their opportunity to have a go. Mr. Speaker, my ability to be addressing these issues here today is due to a tremendous effort from a large team and unflinching support from the Liberal Party, captained by our leader, Tony Abbott. Tony, your strong message to stop the waste, stop the boats and repay the debt really cut through. You led from the front, you led by example, and as a result, our party is intact, our policies are intact, and our integrity is intact. We are united. Thank you for your inspiring leadership. To Julie Bishop, Mark Neame, Richard Shields, Chris Stone, Michael Photius, Wendy Black, I'm sorry I called so often, Barry O'Farrell and all the members of the Liberal Party, thank you. My patron senator, Connie Firavanti-Wells, door knocking was never more fun. My neighbouring Liberal colleagues, Philip Ruddock, my new Harry Hopman, Joe Hockey, Paul Fletcher, Maurice Payne, state colleagues, Victor Dominello, Greg Smith, Anthony Roberts and Stuart Ayres. Your advice, encouragement and many hours of hands-on assistance will always be highly valued, but most of all, I value your friendship. To our local representatives, Mayor Artin Etmetjian, Councillors Bill Pickering, Roy Maggio, Sarkis Udalian, Sue Hoopman and Ivan Petch, I appreciate your support and look forward to working closely with all of you over the coming years to put control over local decisions back in council hands. To Alan Jones, Ida Buttrose and Lachlan Murdoch all encouraged me from day one of this new career. I thank you for your friendship and for your support. In particular, Alan's role as MC of our Legends Dinner with Ken Rosewell, Mark Waugh, Benny Elias, John Conrads, Don Spencer and Bettina Arndt. To watch Alan interview Bettina on the issue raised in her latest book on sexuality and relationships was most entertaining and educational for Alan. The generous support of Carolyn Curry on that night was phenomenal, and also David Heyman. His great support and generosity was also present. The core team that prepared me for political life and guided me in my fight for pre-selection were Josh Bahari, Bill Goff, Craig Brown and Rob Moffat. I thank you for your hard work, your dedication, your honest advice, times too honest. We are due for another dinner. Our campaign team, led by our General Rod Bosman, a military man, and his trusty Lieutenant Nat Smith. Nat, thank you for coming today. Mitch Geddes, who accompanied me on every single one of those 9,000 door knocks. Peter Poulos, Carolyn Benenke, Matt Dawson, Michael Kit Marides. He mail-dropped 35,000 homes. Stephen Woodnut, who spent from dawn till too late for him and me as my PA. Thank you, Stephen. Sue Honeybrook, Jerome Smith, Richard Andrikis, Miriam Geddes, Peter Graham, Peter Bardos and Artin. To every booth captain, stall worker, scrutineer, pamphlet distributor, dinner jacket wearer, balloon blower and every one of the hundreds of volunteers. I've had many chances to express my appreciation since election day, but I say here in this place, thank you so very much. We had a campaign slogan during this time of battle, and I would call out, "What time is it?" And whoever I was near had to respond, "The best time of your life." My office staff have this chant now. They're known as Team Alexander, Jackie, Josh, Peter, Belinda, Suzanne and Jennifer. I'm just one member of your team, and we have much work to do. To Gillian, you have been by my side throughout this odyssey, quietly supportive, the voice of reason, always ready to listen, even when I call late at night. Thank you for your understanding. Thanks also to your daughters Sophie and Georgia for their support, and your mother Elizabeth, who is here today. To my children, in the lottery of life, I have been very fortunate in regard to family. Emily, Georgia and Charlie are all perfect. When they are not perfect, I threaten them with DNA testing, with the possibility of expulsion. Christopher, I think you understand this. Where is the love? Naturally, we play tennis together. Sometimes we hit a lot and talk a little. Generally, we talk a lot and not hit very much at all. Today, Emily drove a manual car from Sydney, which I taught her to drive. It was a bonding experience. Emily is fearful that I will tell jokes, dad jokes, which are the worst jokes in the world. Georgia is safe from such embarrassment as she is on gap year in England. I talked to her this morning. She's now in Ireland. I also taught her to drive a manual car. When I express an opinion, as I have today, Georgia always refers to me as theory man. Charlie and I watched 2.5 Men together, and I apologise for that. We laugh at the same time, and I apologise for that too. I'm teaching Charlie to drive a manual at the moment. That's work in progress. What do I want for my children? What I want for every Australian? Opportunity. The opportunity to pursue their dreams, whatever they are, and not be restrained by their age, their sex or their colour. Opportunity is to be able to have a go. Opportunity without discrimination is to be given a fair go. We here have much work to do. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for your indulgence, and I thank the House.
Order. The question is that the address be agreed to. The member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to congratulate the member for Bennelong on an excellent first speech.